Hi folks, Alex Wiseman here. We are talking about goals and objectives today. And we just spent the first two parts of our screencast looking at a peer review of groups' introductions. We're moving ahead now to talk about goals and objectives because for your grant proposals, you have a whole section that you're going to dedicate to goals and objectives. And so I wanted to make sure that we were all clear about what they actually do and what they might look like. So let's start there. What do goals and objectives do? Well, as you can see, they are broad, they are general, they are intangible, and they're abstract statements of what you wish to accomplish. By the way, we're talking about goals here. Goals. Goals are broad, general, intangible, and abstract. They provide a description of what your organization hopes to accomplish, and they broadly identify the results or outcomes you plan to accomplish. But they're really about final impact, right? What will be the big splash? What is the final result? What is the huge outcome that somehow aligns with your funder's mission and goals, right? So that's where you're going. You've got goals, which are the big stuff. Now, linking goals and hooking readers is really important because goals must link back to your needs statement, right? Whatever you said the need was in your previous sections, your goals have to link to that because that's what you're doing, right? The goal is to meet the need or to solve the problem that was your need. So you're going to want to use visionary words in your goals. And you could try using words like these, like decrease or deliver or develop or establish, improve, increase, produce, provide. Right? These are all action words. These all are words that help the reader understand what your broad goal is. So, for example, one goal statement might be decrease the degree of malnutrition among young children in disadvantaged communities of the Cape Winelands district of the Western Cape, South Africa. Now, why is that visionary? Well, one, decrease the degree of malnutrition. That is broad, general, somewhat intangible, and abstract, right? Because there's no real specific statement about what that means. Right? It basically means make more people less hungry, or make more people better fed, or give them better nutrition, or improve the health of. I mean, there are lots of different ways that you could think about that, but it makes it broad enough that you could actually have some sort of a. It makes it broad enough that it's a goal, right? It also identifies who your target population is and where they're located. Young children in disadvantaged communities of the Cape Wineland district of the Western Cape in South Africa. That is putting a pinpoint on it. Now, what is the difference between goals and objectives? Well, goals, as we've already talked about, are big, broad, general, intangible, and abstract. Objectives represent steps toward accomplishing the goals. Right? That means that objectives are narrow, they're precise, they're tangible, and they're concrete. And that means that they can be measured. So if you take narrow, precise, tangible, and concrete, and you contrast that with broad, general, intangible, and abstract, you'll see that the goals are the cloud, right? And the objectives are the raindrops that come out. They're the specific elements that come out of this amorphous goal, right? And so they have to be narrow, precise, tangible, and concrete because they have to be measured. The goal is broadly what you want to achieve. The objectives show how you're going to achieve that, and they play a key role in you eventually evaluating the success of your proposed program or project. And the way that you're going to develop these objectives is using the SMART method. We talked about this in class itself last week. The SMART method for developing objectives that will go along with your grant proposal goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And so for each of your objectives, you should have a goal. Let's start there. You should have a goal listed. And you could just do this in outline form. Let's say you've got two big goals, goal 1 and goal 2. And then for goal 1, you've got objective A, objective B, objective C. These are 3 narrow, precise, tangible, and concrete ways that you will be able to achieve that first goal. And you want to ask, is the objective precise and well defined? Is it clear? Can everyone understand it? In other words, if someone got really nitpicky, like I will, and asked, well, why, or how, or what, or how, or why, then there would not be any question, because it will be so focused that there won't be room for those kinds of questions. Secondly, it will be measurable in that we can say, how will the individual know when the task has been completed? What evidence is needed to confirm it? Have you stated how you will judge whether it has been completed or not? We have to be able to know when the objective is finished. Right? When you've reached X percentage of students in this disadvantaged population, right? Then you know that the task has been completed. Next, is it achievable? Is it within your capabilities? In other words, is this something you can really do? Remember, we talked about this in a previous class. This is why you invite collaborators who are experts. You invite expert collaborators. And by the way, if your group has not done that yet, get with it. Right? You have to be able to be capable of delivering whatever it is you say you're delivering. You have to have sufficient resources available to enable this to happen, or at least be able to articulate what resources you need so that that can be part of what you ask for from the grant maker. And you have to be able to convince the grant maker that what you're proposing can be done at all. Now, it might be something that theoretically is super important, but when it comes to actually implementing it, there's no infrastructure, there's no capacity, there's no resource availability, there's the mindset or the culture or the context isn't ready. I mean, you have to consider these things and make sure that whatever you're proposing could actually get done. Realistic. Is it possible for the individual to perform the objective, or for your group, your team, your whatever to perform the objective? How sensible is the objective in the current, this says business because SMART is often used for business objectives, but in the current, let's say, social context or cultural context or educational context, right? How sensible is that objective, knowing what the context is in Siem Reap, Cambodia, for example? Does it fit into the overall pattern of your team's group, or of your group or your team's work? That will be important. So you're doing the CFC Lehigh University partnership, right? Well, does what you're proposing somehow fit with that? If it does, great. Is it sensible then in the current cultural, social, or educational context? And is it possible for your group, this group, to perform that objective? Lastly, timely. Is there a deadline? I hope so. Is it feasible to meet this deadline? I hope so. Is it appropriate to do this work now? It better be. And are there review dates? There should be. Right? So you can be actually saying that by a particular date, after 3 weeks, or after 6 months, or by the end of 2014, right? Whatever. Then you need to make sure that all this other stuff you've built up can actually be met by that deadline, that you can start immediately, or that you can start as soon as there is a very specific foundation or groundwork laid. Maybe you need particular resources to be in place first, or maybe you need to move a team over to Cambodia first. Whatever it is, how soon can you start? Right? And then will you be reviewing progress? Right? So you'll want to check 3 weeks in, 2 months in, 6 months in, after a year. Or maybe it's a monthly thing. Every month, at the end of the month, we do a review, and this is what it looks like. However you set it up, it should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So let me give you or pass along some objective advice. This doesn't mean as in I'm stepping back and I'm objective about it. This means we're talking about goals and objectives, right? So for objectives. This is taken from Carlson and O'Neill McElrath's book, Winning Grants, published in 2013. I don't happen to have a copy of it in front of me right now, so I can't show you the cover, but you can look it up. You're going to see that in their advice, they're going to repeat some of the things that I've just talked to you about. And what I want you to do is I want you to pay attention to what those are so that you can see which of the advice I gave you earlier is being emphasized. So first, state your objectives. This is the realistic, concrete, tangible, measurable thing. State your objectives in quantifiable terms. Now, this isn't saying that everything has to be measured in numbers. Because we know that that isn't always the case. But you're going to want to state your objectives in quantifiable terms, even if you're using qualitative methods to evaluate them, so that the grant maker, the funder, can easily see whether or not that objective has been completed. That's why we use phrases like 20% of the population will participate in this particular program, right? What you're really, qualitatively, what you're interested in is the quality of the content that's delivered through the program. But for the funder, they're going to want to know that a certain number of people in the target group have moved through that, right? So state your objectives in quantifiable terms. It will make it easier for you to evaluate and measure. It will make it easier for the funder to see what exactly is happening, and it will overall give your objectives some of that SMART characteristic. Again, not saying that quantitative is better than qualitative, simply saying that you want the funder to be as happy as possible. State your objectives in terms of outcomes, not process. What are the outcomes? What's the finished product? Because the process could be ongoing forever, right? These are supposed to be long-term impact, sustainable projects. The process may never end. What matters is, what did the process produce? Or how many people had contact with the content? Or whatever it is, right? So what is the outcome? What is actually produced? What can we observe that is finished? That's going to be important. As a result, objectives should specify the result of an activity. The activity is the process. The result of that activity is the outcome. Make your emphasis on the result of the activity, not on the process. Objectives should identify the target audience or community being served. In the example that I used, let me get back here. In the example that I used here, where's the target community? Young children. It's a little broad, but we know generally we're probably talking about primary school age. In disadvantaged communities, which in the Cape Winelands district of South Africa is going to be black South Africans or mixed race South Africans. In other words, not white South Africans. We know where. The Cape Winelands district is a specific region around a city called Paarl and that environment of the Western Cape in South Africa. We know very well, I'll get back to it, what the target audience and the community being served is. And the objectives are showing us how they're being served, like what the result of us serving them is. Remember that objectives need to be realistic, that's the R in SMART, and capable of being accomplished within the grant period. That's the T in timely, right? So realistic and timely are going to be key elements for grant makers when they're reviewing grant proposals that come to them. So let's take another look at an objective example. This is based on the goal that we just went back to, right? We could say by the end of year 1, provide 125 mothers in disadvantaged communities in the Cape Winelands district of the Western Cape, South Africa, with a 2-hour training program that provides health and nutrition information. Now, do you see how this is a result and not an activity? Right? It's the 125 mothers have been provided a 2-hour training program. The program itself has content, health and nutrition information. But the objective says a certain number of mothers are going to be moved through this training program. Right? Now, I know that this may smack of a watered down statement, but it's not. Because remember, you are actually interested with the content of this program. The funder is interested with how many people are being reached and whether or not they're getting that content. We're going to pause here and come back with part 4 of this screencast.